Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OG's Power Hour. Our other two hosts are a little late this morning, so we'll have to see if they actually show up today. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to jump on and get things started. Today, we're talking about the side effects of growing cannabis. It's one of those things that's kind of out there, but we find, especially with the living soil crowd, that we have a lot of people that once they find out the best way to grow their cannabis and how to get the most genetic potential out of their cannabis with living soil, that they transition into growing vegetables. Like you look at John Berfelo's book, on the LED lights, and a lot of it has to do with growing other things than cannabis. That's the beauty of cannabis, is she teaches us how to grow to get the best cannabis for our medicine. And we also start realizing that growing our own vegetables and having that kind of a thing in our diet that's actually a healthy food source really improves our health. So all things that we consume can be considered medicine, right? Whether that's a fruit, a vegetable, if you're growing your own um, organic whatever, kale, spinach. There's all of these different plants that we can grow. And once we learn how to grow our cannabis at a different level, then we grow our vegetables, our food sources at that different level. And that's really what I wanted to point out as a side effect to growing cannabis and growing your own medicine, is this movement into growing your own foods. Now, it doesn't just equate to, what we're consuming, but if, say, we're raising cattle or sheep or goats or any other kind of animal, chickens, pigs, etc., having them eating healthy, nutritious food is part of what they were supposed to be doing, and they're getting that biology and nutrition into their bodies so that when we consume them, we're getting what we were supposed to be or are supposed to be getting, which is healthy food into our bodies. And that's one of the most important things for our health, is having the nutrition in the food that we're consuming. If you haven't noticed, most of the food that we consume, that we buy from a grocery store, doesn't have a lot of nutrition in it. And that can be a real problem long term for our health, because that nutrition just isn't there. Then you're looking at doing supplements. That's why the supplements, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, because what we're supposed to be getting from our food sources just isn't there anymore. Now, a lot of people talk about vitamin D and getting out into the sun, and that is a definite necessity for our health and our animals' health, etc. So we want to be doing that as much as we can. But when you're out there, we want to look at grounding ourselves, taking your shoes off. Part of the reason that we're not as healthy as we used to be is we used to not have rubber on our feet. We used to have natural substances, leather, etc., or barefoot. And you not only were, especially if you were barefoot, having your feet in that dirt or soil, and getting through the soles of your feet the biology that is there. And if you don't remember, our skin is the largest organ on our body, and we actually draw nutrition in through our skin. And so when you were walking around barefoot, or if you're in your gardens now and you're barefoot, you're doing an outside garden, you're getting that biology, you're getting the nutrition that's in that soil, if you have soil, and like Elaine Ingham says, you don't have dirt, you know. Um, and that's one of the main components of health, is that biology that gets in through our skin. You think of the stomata on your plant, it's breathing. Um, it is breathing CO2 in and oxygen out. We are, of course, the exact opposite. We're breathing oxygen in and CO2 out, but it's the same basic principle. Now, on Luna and Alexa's show, The Sun and the Moon, we had a wonderful gentleman on there, and he was talking about, building grows and how to use technology to make sure you weren't getting contaminants into your grow. And he had mentioned a piece of equipment that he was putting in the ducts, and that piece of equipment was breaking down the components of things that were coming in through the air. And I pointed out to him something that he had never really considered, is in breaking down those components into their molecular structure, you're actually allowing that into your room, not as the harmful thing that it was, but as the components were. And then your plant can literally breathe that in through the stomata. It's falling onto the leaf structure, and the components at the molecular level is really what the plant needs. It's not about, feeding your plant these long chain molecules or components. It's about breaking it down to that molecular level. And that's what the biology is really doing. It's taking whatever you're putting into your soil system, whether you're putting it into hydroponics, all those components are taken in, broken up by the biology into the molecules and the atoms that need to be used to make the other components that is necessary for your plant. So, Luna talks a lot about the acids, etc., those kind of components. And these are all things that your plant needs, but where does it get those? It's not a natural thing in the soil system to have an acid in the soil. It's the biology that's taking those molecules and stitching all those together. Now, inside of your cells, it's the biology that takes the components, puts them together inside of the cell. Consider it like building a house. Um, you need the superstructure, you need the outside walls, you need the roof, you need the flooring. That's your cell. Okay, and in your plant, that's your structure of your plant, is just taking those cells and putting them side by side. Now, I talk about the S phase of cell development, and that's really what is making your plant. It's what's making our bodies. It's the biology that's taking all the components that you're putting in. And like Andy Lopez talks about rock dust and the minerals in the rock dust, and how you need the wide variety. You need the 97 trace elements that are out there. And I think it's 97, but you guys can check me on that. You need those in order to have the full genetic potential of your plant, but it's also the full genetic potential of our bodies, of our animals' bodies. And the side effect to growing cannabis and learning this knowledge is you start to understand that you need those minerals as well. If you didn't know, and it was something I didn't know until about a year ago, that there's actually gold in our hair. Now, it's in the parts per billion, but there's actually gold in our hair. So we need a certain amount of gold coming into our bodies for us to grow hair. Did you guys know that? I sure the heck didn't know that. But when I found out about it, it really started to make sense in a lot of different ways. Oh, there's Mr. Toad showing up. Hey Tony, how you doing, brother?
Man, sorry, brother. My phone had died and I did not realize what time it was. Oh, man,
Oh,
I'm
no
sorry.
worries, man.
I just
I
turned
was
it
just
back on
going
when your
on.
message. Sorry, kid.
Oh, it
How's
doesn't
everybody doing?
matter. Oh, I'm doing fantastic, Tony. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing all right, man. Just dealing with a bad back today.
Oh, I know that. I deal with that every single day.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, it ain't
it's
fun. I used to get bad backs all the time. I haven't had an issue since all my health shit. But today I woke up and my back is just having issues. My fucking casters on my wheelchair have been locking up from the bearings going out, and I'm waiting for some parts to get here. And yesterday I almost got tossed out the chair, and I think that's what did it.
ouch. That your old chair, your new chair, the bearings are going already.
My new chair. Well, but I go through bearings like that in a chair. Period. Because I'm always outside watering. They just they bind up and shit. So these I've had this chair now. These lasted longer than the rest. This has been like 6 months now. I usually have to replace them every 3 months.
Okay. So
But
do
I
you
don't.
stock them like do you like I know a lot of things that when we're growing, we're stocking up on stuff. So
Yeah, I got a whole
yeah.
bunch of these, but because of this chair is slightly different than my old one, I have to have a bearing press to put the bearings in, and that's on back order till Thursday. So I'm
Oh
fucking
geez.
stuck. So that's the problem. I can't. They don't sell them here anywhere locally, and if they do, I don't have time to go find them with my mom. So um, I have to order everything and rely on who can get it to me first. So that's what I'm waiting for. Waiting
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
fucking bearing press and some new ceramic grease to put in here because I don't like using the normal grease that's in there. They don't last as long. Whoa, what's
Yeah.
going on?
I don't
Hold on.
know. I can
My
still
camera
hear
just
you, Tony.
my camera turned off for some reason. The heck?
I don't know. I didn't do it, man. Honest. I was reaching for my coffee. Maybe that was it. It was something on my
I
coffee.
just got a new adapter for my
Camera.
computer, and I've been having the same issue when I use the wrong USB-C port. I keep looking having my camera turn on and off randomly. I'll
Okay,
be
you're
right back.
using
Hold on.
an old USB 2 instead of the USB 3 port that it needs. Oh, device not connected. So he'll be back. But anyway, I was talking about the side effects of growing cannabis and growing food and our personal health, and I think that's really missed by some people until they find podcasts like this that are talking about it. And I think that it's a great segue into growing our own food and focusing on our own health, is having this knowledge of turning dirt into soil. And it's all about the biology and how things work with the biology to create that living soil that puts the nutrients into the plants, etc. So Tony, we're talking about the side effects of growing cannabis, and one of the main side effects I've found is that people move into growing their own vegetables and fruits, etc. Now I know you're cloning trees, etc. How much vegetables, or are you growing any vegetables at all?
I don't. I physically can't eat vegetables much myself, so I don't really grow them
Okay.
anymore. I used to be able to, and I would grow tomatoes and squashes, cucumber, watermelon. But these days, with my health issues, I have issues with fiber, so I
Yeah.
really don't grow them. So mostly just cannabis in my garden. I got strawberries out there, lemons, and cannabis. And then I
Okay, so
also
you can eat
grown
the
redwoods.
fruits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I clone my redwood trees and my lemon trees, my cannabis. I've also got dragon fruit out there, but this is the
Oh,
first year
cool.
that I started growing dragon fruit, so I need to transplant that and put it in a more suitable spot because it's starting to want to cling to something and grow outwards. So
Right.
I need to do that. Um, Super easy to clone those.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I've never grown it. Like it's not something I can grow in northern Canada. You know,
Oh,
it's
sure
it's
you
more of
can.
a
If you've got an
tropical.
indoor garden, you could grow it in your inside garden, no
Well,
problem.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm actually looking at getting started growing again. I'm looking at rebuilding my grow, and I'm actually going to document that if it does happen, because it all boils down to having the funds to do the proper insulation, etc. Like the having the foam board and sealing it properly. Once you've got it sealed from the air movement, it's really easy to you know uh, maintain those temperatures.
Yep. I'm about to start an indoor tent going here
Yeah.
myself.
And Ganja Man, Dale, he's basically missing in action. We're not sure what exactly happened, but uh, there's rumors that he had left this plane of existence, and then there's rumors that he hasn't. So yeah, it just all of a sudden we just got no contact from him anymore, and that's where it all stands. So
Let's see. I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm trying to find that big room I got.
okay. That's the one where you have the fans pointed towards the roof, so you get a different
Yeah, I'm
style of
trying
air
to find a good
circulation.
one. A lot of my videos are just showing the plants from down low.
Yeah, and like Laura says, air movement is a must. And yeah, unless you want PM and you want the all the different things that come with not having proper air movement, you definitely need to have that air movement. And there's a lot of different ways. Just one of the things that I always found, I had the fans along the side, and I really had to make sure I wasn't blowing excessive amounts of air directly on my cannabis because I was burning the leaves. It was just too much. You want it just more of a gentle flow of air. You don't want to direct, blasting your plant all the time, right?
Mm-hmm. That wind directly on them is not great for them. It's going to cause a lot of issues usually. So I've always put them straight up. I just don't like blowing my fans directly at my plants unless that's the only option I got.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me see here.
Well,
Where is this going?
and that's the one of the beauties of what I'm going to be doing is I can build it the way I want to build it, and I don't have to worry about having or building it in such a way where I'm going to have that concern. Okay. Oh yeah, and there goes the phone. Let's swap you over here.
So let me see. Come on now, load the picture. So this will show that fan up on the roof in there.
Yeah, yeah, I can see it there.
But I always point my fans up. That way I don't have to have any issues with plants growing into fans on the walls.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Or having to grow plants under the fans that I mount on the walls. But there's an air conditioner here. I've never used it. That room stays so cool. I've never had to use it. And then there's 1,000-watt hoods. There's 4,000 watts with straight lines for cooling them. I don't use the rigid or the stuff that stretches. It collects
Yeah.
nothing but dust. So these are solid lines, so air can flow completely through it. It comes in here and then goes out on this side up over here at the top of the roof. And then the fan here, that's a 20-inch fan that I would keep on high all the time to move all the air in the room.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing. It's like I don't use the lights that put out that much heat. I use my LEDs. So
yeah, but LEDs also they put out different type of heat. So they're not radiating from themselves really, but the heat on the plant. If you go check your leaf temperature, they're going to show much hotter under an LED system than they will under a regular one. So you still got to figure out how to cool them. And this post was to show people that you can build a room cheap. This room cost me $300. The tent cost $200 to set up. So you
Yeah.
could have a 2x4 tent or a 10x12 room at this time. For the material, everything but the equipment, like the lights and stuff, aren't added. But the wood to
Yeah.
build it, literally, that room over here cost me $300, and it's 10 feet by 12 feet, triple
Yeah.
insulated.
Now that is 200 or 200 2017 pricing. Wood is a little bit more expensive,
I made
but
that even before that. I mean, let's see, 2000. That's been there for over. It's like 2014, I think. I made that one.
yeah.
Maybe even before that, I might have made it like a 2010. Shit.
Yeah, pricing for wood was a lot cheaper back then than it is now, that's for sure. But even
Even
at
at double,
double,
even if that room costs you $1,000, if you think you're gonna
yeah,
grow as much weed in a small little tent, then building a purpose-built room for growing and for curing cannabis, you just don't understand what's really happening with cannabis. Like to
yeah,
have a place to cure your weed at the same size that you're growing it in, that can maintain temperature, is going to give
mhm.
you a far superior cannabis than anything you were ever doing before.
Temperature and humidity. Don't forget, you have to control that humidity as well because you want it at that sweet spot. But so anyway, what would you suggest for people for cover crops, etc., or stuff that, like you said, you're growing strawberries. You have a 4x4 bag. Could you grow a couple of strawberry plants in there with your cannabis?
Not really. The cannabis plant will overcrowd the system and just kill the strawberries out eventually. They won't get
Okay.
enough light. So, for a cover crop with cannabis, you want to grow something that you literally want to die and cut back and turn over in there. So, I would, depending on stage, like I'd prefer to put legumes in there and grow them before I even started the cannabis, chop them down, and then use a mulch layer to have that stuff become part of the system. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to grow anything with my cannabis while it's growing because those actually take nutrients from the plant. I want my cover crop to return nutrients, not take them. So I would I like to cycle out the system. I used to have two different, like, if this tent held 3 15-gallon pots, I would have 6 pots, 3 of them
Right.
growing a cover crop in another area, and 3 that I'm growing in currently. That way I could chop everything down. When this is done, move the other pots in here, chop the cover crop down, let that go back into the soil and plant right in those. And then just
Right.
cover it up with something.
And nitrogen fixation from the legumes
Legumes,
roots.
but
Yeah.
not just the nitrogen fixation. They also those nodules become source of biology. So all
Yeah.
the fungi and bacteria are latched right onto the roots. They are trying to cycle that nutrient out of that node and return it back to the soil. So
It's
by
what their
cutting that
job is,
plant
man.
down, yeah, and by cutting it down now and letting it die, it's going to return itself back to your soil system. So it also could depend on if you do a soil test, what is your soil deficient in? So you could add it with a dry amendment, or you could
Yeah.
grow a cover crop that would return it and do the same thing. Or if you're short on calcium, you could grow some dandelions in your soil, and when they drop, they're going to return an extra calcium to the soil.
Now, at the same time, are you pulling out the calcium to be able to return it? But then are you pulling it out from the sand, silt, clay, and organic, so it's easier for the biology to break down than putting in, say, a powdered calcium?
I prefer using I use calamino from BioAg. It's a bioavailable form of plant available calcium and amino acids. So, like, you could put a shit ton of oyster shells in your soil. It's going to take a whole season to break down. That means with cannabis, you didn't have any of that calcium available to your plant in a short grow. Right. So if
Yeah.
you're growing indoors and using calcium flour from shells, it's going to be way harder for your system to return that to the plant. You're going to show calcium deficiencies. If you use an immediately available form of organic calcium, like I'm doing with the calaminos, that gives you building blocks from the aminos and the calcium carried over to give it the energy that it needs to build those same cells.
Yeah.
So with cannabis being a short-term flower, if you're growing indoors, you should tailor your organics to work in that time frame that you're actually growing in. So like there's certain types of calcium I wouldn't use indoors, and like oyster shell, I don't like using that because it takes too long to break down. I'd rather use gypsum or using the like I said, calaminos that come from sourcing of soybeans and such things like that that are 100% organic, GMO free.
Yeah. No,
Those are
that
the
works
things.
good for small pots, Tony. But if you were looking at like somebody like Leighton Morrison's system, you can put in those longer term
Yeah, but we're
sources.
still growing cannabis. If you're
Yes,
going to
but
grow
I'm talking
cannabis for
keeping
3
your
months,
soil going though.
they're not going to be able to utilize. Like if we use rocks as our foam, as rock dust in the soil, our cannabis is never going to break that down and become available. It's just rocks and dirt. They'll never be able to utilize it until we've had that soil for 3, 4, 5 years, and now it slowly starts to release the phosphorus out of the rock. All right. So if we're growing cannabis, it's worthless. If we were growing trees, it's awesome, right? Because a tree needs a slow release of calcium over an extremely long period of time. So that's where we got to tailor our inputs to what we're growing. And so you can
Well,
have
there
all
is,
the calcium in the
especially in
world
the
in there.
small pots.
Well, even in a large pot, like using an indoor grow setup doesn't grow like nature. So,
No.
like for using multiple different horizontal layers in an indoor setup, and you're just going to top water everything, you're not utilizing that system the way nature invented it. Nature uses water from the bottom up, so your roots
Yeah.
would grow down into that. So if you build a horizontal soil system and still top water, you're not utilizing it correctly. Right?
Yeah.
You're just forcing everything lower and lower and lower, and the top layers of that shit become just fucking spent out soil that you're going to constantly have to re-amend because you done shoved everything into your bottom sections and those different horizons. But most people aren't utilizing it correctly the way nature has formed it. It's a great system, but if you're not going to set it up to where it can pull the moisture from below, you're going to lose quite a bit of your nutrients from the top side from just top watering.
Yeah. And that's where that's a key point is, it's designed really as a wicking system. We had Tom Landry on with Leighton and Av here for the last couple of weeks on Soil Matters, and he was showing how he is literally watering from the bottom. Every once in a while, he'll water from the top, just like nature does.
Just like a rain happens,
yeah.
You're supposed to treat that as like an aquifer. So if it has enough moisture in the system, you shouldn't even be adding any to it. And when it doesn't have enough, you only add enough to fill the aquifer. So you're basically building a miniature. That's why that's horizontal systems not working in a pot, a real small pot. There's not enough surface area for anything to happen. There's not enough depth in it. It's just 100% a way to fail trying to utilize a system that folks don't understand. But in a large set, in a big bed that's set up right, and you bottom water those things, they will work fucking killer. They can. And then again, over time, in a facility that utilizes that same bed, you can start to use different forms of calciums that become available longer, different phosphorus loads from rock dust and such. But if you're just using a pot or something that's needs to be top dressed all the time, utilizing horizontal systems really not going to work in that small of a setup. You're always constantly adding something that's going to turn it out of balance because you're not relying on the volume to feed your plant. You're trying to rely on these inputs to feed your plant. It's like mixing oil and water. Like eventually you can get them to emulsify, but you let them sit long enough and they'll separate. And that's what's starting to happen.
Well, and that's, one of the keys is, for latent system is I wouldn't go more or less than really a 4x4 or a 3x3 bed, that, is 2 feet deep so that you're getting the volume in there that your plants need. Yeah.
But then those systems in nature, the way they work is the roots don't go straight down. They feed out and go sideways. And that
you got feeder roots.
Moisture up and breaks down everything from the living biology, and they constantly feeding the plant. And then the plant drops some of itself into the soil and revitalizes the soil. And it constantly keeps happening. But like I said, we're indoor gardeners of cannabis, and we're growing on a whole different style. So where if we don't return anything back from the plant, eventually just going to show so many deficiencies in that system. It gets hard to utilize those. It becomes a lot of work sometimes because of the
Well,
small size of the beds people are using.
and that's the thing. It's the small size that you really want to, like I know Leighton talked about doing house plants, but house plant is something that's just continually growing. Where cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
we're pulling those nutrients out. That's where foliar feeding can really help your cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
because you're giving her the nutrients at the right time when she needs it. She needs a different set of hormones, of acids, etc., in veg than she does in, late veg or early flower or to late flower, although you're not going to foliar in late flower, but it's that those differences that we are learning what is necessary at the different levels of plant growth for the cannabis plant. And we can learn those same things for vegetable plants as well. Like, like you used to go into the grow shop and you talk about tomatoes, because, cannabis was so similar, but yet we're finding out now she's not really as similar as we did think at those times back,
Oh,
20
yeah, not
years
at
ago.
all. No,
Yeah.
not
But
at
still,
all. That's why
people
everyone
think
needs to
that
go
she
by.
is.
Oh, they do. But then there's also the same on the other side that people think that this plant is so much different that she has to have her own very specific grow techniques, right? And then they don't realize that we're fucking with a million different hybrids. So none of them have the same nutrient requirement as the other one. So it's like people that make or are looking for a fertilizer that's tailored for cannabis and don't
Yeah.
understand that you're not growing the cannabis they made that fertilizer for. So that's where doing soil tests and tissue samples tell you, does this plant use more phosphorus or calcium than the ones next to it? Or am I just wasting my money and time top dressing shit that this plant doesn't actually need?
Mm-hmm. That's where
Right?
I look at it. I'm not growing a plant. The biology grows the plant. I want to focus on growing the biology because that's the construction crew for my plant.
And the biology and the leaves on the plant. Without those two things, you're really gonna have issues. Stoners, we've been taught for so long to rely on a bottle to give us the nutrient load, and then to remove as many leaves so we can get bigger buds, without understanding that those are where the plant has stored the nutrients that we so dearly bought so many bottles of bullshit of to put on the plant. And now we're
Yeah.
wasting time growing more leaves than flowers.
Yeah. It's also a weed that grows in a tour. I'm not sure what a tour is.
It's not a weed, it's a flower.
Well,
It's
yeah. Actually, we've got Ron Harrington, Gold Hat Seeds, coming off Leighton and Ab this afternoon. He sent me a picture of one of his plants growing out of his driveway. Just a seed got dropped. So, but it's those types of hardiness of this plant, that really shows that, like other weeds or earlier transitional plants, as I like to call them, are the ones that can survive in really extreme conditions. Would you, if you found a plant like that was growing up through the cracks of the pavement, is that the one that you think that you really want to have and maybe take some cuttings of because it's a
No,
strong genetic?
it doesn't mean it's a strong genetic. It just means it got some water and sunlight right there and it'll grow.
True.
Strong genetics would mean, what am I looking for? Am I looking for specific things from that plant? I would have to sequence it or genotype it from breeding to find out if it's strong. Just because it grew in a crack don't mean it's strong. It just happened to fall in a crack is all that meant.
And that have the right moisture content, enough soil, and et cetera, yeah. But there's so many different ways to look at so many different things, and that's why I tell people to listen to many voices. What are your thoughts on something like just taking a handful of seeds and casting them out on some soil and putting some mulch on and seeing what happens? Do you think the best seeds are going to show themselves, maybe pop a little bit earlier or anything like that? What are
No,
your thoughts on that? No, you don't think so?
no, No, it came from the same gene pool. That's like, say you had 10 children, right? And
Okay.
you only judge on whether or not they're all can catch a football, right? And only one of them catches every time. So now you've said that this person is of better genetics. They came from the same two parents. This person just happens to be better at catching a football. We didn't judge them on anything else. So that's like judging a plant as being superior because it grew in a crack instead of finding out once I flower at 5 weeks, it turns into a intersex plant or it doesn't breed, right? There's so many other reasons that would make something uh, superior beyond the very small thing that we think we're looking at as a superior trait. Nature has created seeds to grow after going through the acid of a belly, right? And then being frozen over winter. And then it takes so much moisture that you could kill that thing if you did. If you set it in the amount of moisture it receives in the springtime, it would die,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's made to germinate because of dormancy. Once it hits the correct conditions, it's going to germinate. It doesn't mean it's superior or not because it did or didn't. It needs to have the right shit to germinate. Like I've had people throw my seeds out because they didn't germinate, and then 5 days later in the compost pile, they all exploded. Was it
Yeah.
the seed or was it your shitty biology in the soil? Right. So now you're judging my seeds on your inferior soil biology when the guy outside throws them in his compost pile and they pop in 48 hours and he thinks they're the strongest seeds he ever had. It wasn't the
Yeah.
seed, it was the biology that's around it. Right.
Yeah.
So us thinking that because we found this one thing in this one area, it must be superior without tracking why did it show up there. We can't say that it's just a superior thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have to have the exact right mix of moisture, of biology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for a seed to germinate. You look at, you work up, some grass and you leave it as soil. What's going to pop up? All these what people call weeds. But all it is you've created the right atmosphere, the
Mm-hmm.
right conditions for that seed to germinate because it's going, oh, I'm in this condition. This is my time, because those seeds can sit there for, well, I would think, I won't even make a guess on how long, but I would say hundreds of years easily, just as you said, sitting dormant until it reaches the right conditions.
As long as it doesn't run out of moisture, sugars, and enzymes,
Yeah.
the seed should germinate. That's why storage is key. But even unstored, I've got seeds that I haven't stored correctly, 60 years old, and they'll try to germinate. They'll still send a radical out. They may not grow after that. But the fact that the radical popped out of the cell, that's germination. They're
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
germinating. It's my environment that's not allowing that germination process to turn into a shoot or a plant, right? If it's gonna activate, that plant should be able to make it. It's me causing it to die, my environment,
Yeah.
because it did what it was supposed to do by germinating. Now, not all of them do that after 60 or 70 years, but like the fact that through history we've been able to awaken seeds 1,000 years old with the
Yeah.
proper shit. That doesn't mean that when we woke was the superior seed. It means the techniques we used were correct for that particular seed. So you could say
Yeah.
that your knowledge was superior than to what you used prior, but to just say that that genetic in that one seed was superior to everything else and that's why I made it is just, it's our incorrect thinking of alpha. Is like only the strong survive. That's not how nature works. Nature works because you literally weren't as strong and you allowed a mutation in, and now your new offspring are stronger than you were. You
Yeah.
weren't the strongest. It found out your vulnerability, your DNA mutated to it, and now your offspring aren't vulnerable to the same thing.
Yeah, Pevin was saying she found some bud rot, and we did have something from Peter Cactus, but let's look at this bud rot first. Um,
Yeah.
Bud rot is generally caused by, Tony, what do you say bud rot is generally caused by?
Your environment again, and the seed stock, usually depending on the mold, it's systemic in the plant. So it was already in there. So it was waiting for the proper thing to show up. So between 72 and 86 degrees and between 60 and 80% humidity, you're going to see that. If it's in the seed line, it's going to show up, period.
So I think the VPD is one of the most important parts of it, because if you keep it out of the sweet spot for that particular biology to grow, it's not going to grow. It's just like we have cancer cells in our bodies. If we're healthy enough and have the right biology, they're not activated. If we're not, they are. Same kind of thing happens in the cannabis plant, or any plant for that matter.
I would kill the plant. The longer you let it go, the spores are in the area. They're going to travel to another plant. Like if it's aspergillus, is it pythium? There's so many different molds out there, and a lot of them are being systemic. Means that just because you've seen it and cut it out doesn't mean you got rid of it. All you did was took out the part you saw. It's still within the plant. So killing the plant removes it from the environment, which cuts down on how much of it goes back into the environment.
Now, if you're going to look at it that way, then take your plastic bag, your garbage bag, put it over, treat it like it'd hermit, and you're wanting to collect the pollen, because those spores are still spores. As soon as you chop that down, you're going to be spreading those spores.
We're going to spread.
Yeah. So if you use a big garbage bag, put it over, tie it off the bottom, then chop that, then you're not going to spread the spores.
And today we can test for these things. Them being systemic, if it's in the seed stock or in the plant, you can send a sample in early and find out that plant's carrying it in the system. It's systemic. It's going to show up eventually. So instead of waiting until the 8th week of flower and then suddenly it's here, kill that fucking plant, and the rest of your garden doesn't end up showing it. That's how we get out of this knowledge, not just guessing.
Yeah. Well, that's where we don't want that. We, like, you look at Peter's question here. I see a lot of heat and light stress in grows, and it looks like deficiencies. So
that's how the Mac 1 space cheese I have outside is. In the position I have it outside, it gets direct sun, and it hates it. It does not want to be in that sunlight. The plant looks like it's deficient as a son of a bitch. It's getting the same regimen as every other plant in my garden. Now, there's a possibility that plant may want something different, but what it's showing is coming from all light stress that's on it.
Yeah.
It'll start to look like calcium deficiencies and potassium deficiency. It'll start looking like a magnesium deficiency. So you're going to see spotting on the lower leaves. You're going to see brown edges on the leaves. You're going to see striping on the stems. So what's happening is that the cations and anion exchanges are fucking way off on the plant because of the way it's transpiring moisture through the system. It's pulling out too much moisture and then leaving too much salts in the bottom, and then those are causing an issue with how the plant processes the nutrients that's in there.
Well, there's only so many exchange sites, and sometimes you got to change up what you're putting in to knock off things from those exchange sites that you don't want, that are causing that nutritional deficiency.
And leaf drop, he says too. Yep. All those things would come back looking like you need to either add something to the soil or not. So you either understand the genetics you're messing with, or you send a test in to find out if what you're guessing is correct.
Or understanding light and how your DLI works and how VPD works. It's that balancing of all those. But like you were talking earlier, Tony, about putting the heat meter or the heat gun on your leaf to checking the temperature. If your lights are too low, yes, you're going to cause a lot of heat stress. Knowing those temperatures, having a little bit of equipment, and understanding how these things work. Like with my LEDs, if I have them too low, and yes, I can overheat it, but you
also alter the spectrum when you drop your LED down because of the way the lenses shoot light out. They shoot as a beam. So if they don't go up high enough, they're not allowed to actually spread the spectrum so that it mixes. You end up with just spots of fucking specific frequencies being shot right on your plant. And that's going to show up as bleaching right on top almost instantaneously. The closer the plant is to that 730 nanometer, the whole top of the plant will turn white on you.
Yeah. And that's where understanding light is so important. And like You know, like you look at a guy like Tom Landry in his commercial, he's actually got lights where he's changing his spectrum throughout the day. He has a sunset, he has a sunrise, and he's using the different wavelengths of light that would naturally come up in the cycle. And you only need to run it so at so much intensity to have your overall DLI, your daily light integral. Once your plant has that, you can't use anymore. So a lot of people are overdriving their lights, producing too
And
much.
that's
And
also dependent on CO2 levels and moisture levels
yeah,
in the room. If you can add enough CO2, you can drive that DLI even higher. But you have to increase the temperature of the room, the amount of moisture in the room,
yeah,
and then the amount of CO2. And then you're also going to need more nutrients through the soil. But you can do it. But just because, like, say my room's doing, like, I have a DLI that's fucking 20% higher than yours, doesn't mean that you can raise yours 20% higher to get my effects. If you don't take into account that I may be using CO2 at 1,800 parts per million, right? Or my EC levels are at 3, right? And you're keeping your EC levels at 1.5. Like, you're not going to get
yeah,
the same growth. All those things become part of how and why we do what we do. The same thing with like the soil setups. All of them work great, but if the person utilizing it doesn't understand it, it's going to fail, right? It could
that's
be
right.
Cooch mix, it could be Leighton's mix, it could be my mix. If you don't
Hmm.
understand how to utilize that, you're going to have issues with it, right? That's where it started off in the old days. We had people posting up super soil mixtures and didn't tell anyone about having biology break that down and making it available. You were using
Yep,
all these long-term sources of nutrients like rock dust and green sand, right? You're trying to get potassium out of green sand, takes 3 to 5 years. Right?
yep,
You're growing cannabis 3 to 5 months. You never could get potassium to your plant. So now your potassium levels are way off, even though in the soil it shows correct. Because as
yep,
it grows, it starts to pull out phosphorus, nitrogen, and the magnesium. And now you have this potassium level starting to spike up as it releases. And now that potassium level spiking causes, again, the cation and anion exchange from happening correctly. And now the plant can't get phosphorus anymore because there's too
hmm,
much potassium in the soil, which then breaks down how much calcium it's able to pick up. And then it just slowly compiles into a worse system because you didn't know what you were utilizing to begin with. You just heard keywords that sounded great, but didn't come with the knowledge on how to utilize it. And that's
yeah,
why it's great when you have Leighton on to tell you about the horizontal system and he breaks down how to utilize it. Whether or not the farmer listening hears it is a whole different issue. I've heard him say
yeah,
it many times. That's why I'm able to come here and say if you don't utilize it correctly, you could fail with a great system like that. Or
yeah,
even my old DDA mix, right? And it's changed over the years when we went from animal products to more plant products because we understand that using a plant returns to the earth and using an animal took from it and we're
hmm.
taking from it again. So we just constantly taking from the earth instead of trying to give back to it. So as
Feed
farmers,
plants,
we evolve.
plants.
Yeah. Feed plants,
Yeah,
plants, really. You do need some things that come from an animal or are animals themselves or a critter like bacteria and fungi. Without
yeah,
those things, your plant-based uh, dirt is going to have a hard time becoming effective to grow your plants. But once you have a biology system popping off, you can
yeah,
almost give it anything, right? You give that thing fucking chunks of meat and it's going to break down, right?
yeah,
There's little plants out there that feed off of just other insect or other, protein sources like animal, like
yeah.
Venus flytrap, right? You don't
Hmm.
feed that through the soil system. You feed it through its leaf system, and you feed it with something that almost any other plant couldn't process.
Well, when it was developed by Mother Nature, there wasn't an interaction with the biology the way there is now in plants. So the biology wasn't actually helping that plant to grow, and it had to find its own protein sources, and
Yeah.
that's why the Venus flytrap is what
Mhm.
she is.
And that's
It's
why
all
it's
about
looking
the
for amino
biology.
acids, right? It's looking for
Yeah,
amino acids along with its not just protein or not just calcium. It has to have specific building blocks with it to create it because it doesn't have that bacteria doing it for it in the root
exactly.
zone. And
Yeah,
that again, utilization, like that plant has learned that it has to utilize all of its environments it's ever put in, different than any other plant. Now, if we try to
hmm,
force that thing to take up nutrients through its roots, it's going to die. right? And as a cannabis grower, 10 or 15 years ago, that's what we would have tried to do. We would have tried to make it take something from a bottle because we didn't want to play with, we don't want to fuck with flies, and we don't want to play with fucking crickets. Today, we'd have a whole room full of different kinds of crickets to feed each one of the leaves to see how it would be different. The education process has taught us so much more about how to grow plants and not just cannabis. We used to get a recipe for weed, we'd get a recipe for tomatoes, we'd get a recipe for our cucumber, and all of them were failures, right? Because no one ever taught us how to be a chef. We just ended up with these fucking recipes and not utilizing how to put them in a pot.
Not understanding.
Like if you're gonna make fucking stew, you don't put the meat in last, right? You got to start off by browning it in the pot and tenderizing it and letting it go through the process. You don't wait till you cook the onions and you break down all the carrots and then put your meat in, right? Or you'll fuck up the whole thing. And we did that for so long by not passing knowledge with the systems we were giving anyone, even if it came from a bottle. If we didn't tell them why we were utilizing something for a specific stage, they never knew how to grow. They just knew how to give this shit at this time. And if it wasn't available, they'd be looking for a brand new fucking fertilizer company to give them samples so they didn't waste their money buying some shit they didn't know about. And today we'll go on walks with our family to collect plant material so that we can get the nutrient sources that we are after. You spend less time in a fucking store, you spend more time with your family, you got less time in the garden wasted, so you're not in there fixing failures. You're building up life, everything around you. Life gets better doing this.
Well, and it's all about the knowledge and the education. The Camp Compost is coming on Alexa probably on the 15th, guys, to talk about their event down in Michigan. And it's all, teaching you how to get the biology and to use plants to feed plants and how to get the best plants you can, and not just cannabis, like Tony said. It's about the other foods. That's the side effect of growing really nutritious cannabis, is you want to grow other nutritious food because you know how much better it actually is for your body.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And not just your body, but your emotional spirit. Everything around you will get better once you start trying to create life instead of saving failures. Like I said, if you're having a calcium deficiency, right, and you're trying to fix that, it's not a positive state of mind. It's fight or flight time when you're trying to fix it. If you had a garden that didn't go through that, you would have been in a better and emotional state, even if you don't utilize anything from the garden besides growing it. Right? That's where farming comes in, teaching people what farming meant to us as humans, why we went from being hunter-gatherers to farmers was because hunting and gathering was killing us. We weren't living a long time. We were being injured, searching for shit. We had to travel around to where the fucking food sources were. So we didn't have any form of safety. We didn't feel like this place was ours. We were always trying to fit into an environment. Instead, when we learned that we could take products we like and learn how to grow them correctly, we became farmers. Once we became farmers, we now aren't wasting our time trying to kill shit all the time. We're harvesting life all around us. And that turns into, again, a better emotional spirit for everything around us, from nature to our family members, to even the food you're eating. When the animal you eat was respected its whole life, instead of just being hunted down to slaughter, like it felt better when you knew that the cow didn't go through starvation. It didn't have to fucking look for water because you made sure all those things were put in place. It feels better. You utilizing nature to make your own world better makes everyone's world better. At least I think so.
I think I have to agree with you wholeheartedly. An ethical farming and the ease, and that's what we're trying to do with the cannabis plant or any plant, is feed it at the right things at a veg cycle and the right things, at a flower cycle. Have the roots in the soil is so important for the interaction of all the plants. You have horizontal gene transfer happening constantly. Now, grow up pollinated or heirloom veggie seeds, then save those seeds and pick out the best plants, flower
And he's
those, save the
actually
seeds, and
explaining on
repeat.
how you would go through to find the superior lines out of there. It's not because it germinated in the spot, it's because you grew them out and it produced larger fruit on a more of it, or a tastier fruit or a different color. And now you can take that
Yeah,
and line breed it with its sisters or brothers that show the same traits. And now you can make
yeah.
purple something, or you can make
Purple
something that produces
tomatoes. They done that already, man.
white strawberries, right? White
Yeah,
strawberries were produced through breeding cacti with no thorns. It's the same thing. Luther Burbank did some crazy breeding through plant selection. So if
look
he
at
would
the
have stopped with, I
roses.
think this plant is superior because it has more thorns, we never would have ended up with a spineless cactus, which is a
Yeah,
beautiful thing, but in nature would have never happened because it's just not going to happen. That's not how they fucking went. But as a human, we can look at that and know that this trait can either be ornamental or maybe it carries some kind of pathogen resistance. When nature doesn't breed for that, nature's like, we're going to make as much seeds from this gene pool as possible. That way, as much of
yeah.
us makes it to the next generation.
Well, and that's the whole thing. That's all there is, really, when you think about it, that a plant wants to do. It wants to, sprout, grow old, reproduce and die. It's all for the next generation, moving forward, and hopefully that plant can proliferate. I won't even try.
Proliferate.
Uh, yeah, in that area, because then you're going into the terroir as well, and
And to
a
sequester
different
carbon,
seed.
right? Not just to pass their own gene pool down, but to save the earth. Like plants are here literally to make sure the carbon above ground doesn't fucking wipe out everything that's alive. They suck it down through their system, store it in the soil, make the soil more fertile instead of the air becoming more deadly. So
Yeah,
just on a whole, farming, like look at the Amazon jungle. That would not be here if we didn't farm. That the whole
yeah,
fucking jungle is a farm. We're realizing that today when they go and look at the trees that are in there. When most of the plants in the Amazon are of plants that were put there by humans, that place
yeah.
is it's a giant farm. We just forgot who the farmers were and how to utilize it. And
Well, you look
that's
at
why we don't know how to make terra preta today, right?
yeah,
They knew how to make the most fertile soil ever seen on Earth, and we can't figure out how to do it, even though we
I
do know, right? Adding
I can tell
charred
you.
I know the farmers today know how to do that have been practicing living soil. The
Yeah,
scientists don't because they aren't into the bacterial load of what's happening. They just want to know the elements that are in it, and the elements
did
in it
you know
aren't
that
going to
Terra
give you
Preta
beneficial.
regrows itself?
Yeah, all soil regrows itself. Have you ever been
Yeah,
anywhere on Earth where the soil just disappears? It's going to move from one place to the other. Soil
yeah,
is always being rebuilt by nature, always.
yeah.
Right?
Well,
That's what we forget. They figured that out over there.
yeah,
They used fire because nature uses fire. It makes the forest more fertile once it happens. So why wouldn't it work if we utilized it in our gardening? That's where we started utilizing activated charcoal, right? Adding that to your soil will increase the biology in there
hmm
1,000 times because of the amount of space you're offering biology to live. If you try
yeah,
to put biology in a fucking dirt clod, there's almost so much space. Take 10% of that out and return 10% with biochar, and now you've
yeah.
got 1,000,000 times more spaces for bacteria to live and
Now,
fungus to live.
you just said 10%, and that's a really good
That's a
point.
high amount. That's huge.
Yeah, like
I would
it's
stick to 2%.
yeah.
But I'm just
Now
using
you're
that as a large number, right? If
yeah,
10%, even though it's a small of the whole,
yeah,
like literally, if you didn't have it in there and then added 10%, you basically added a whole Amazon jungle's worth of space for bacteria and fungus to grow in that wasn't there
yeah.
before.
Now,
And that's what the
considering
TerraPrep is doing.
aquaponics, some of the guys are moving towards using biochar instead of hydrogen in their aquaponics grow.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Schultz was talking about that, and I think it's a wonderful idea because it's just another biofilter
Mm-hmm.
that is necessary, but in a soil system yeah, 2% is a lot. Like Leighton says, don't be a moron. Less can be more. And then you can look at quorum sensing. And now, is that a spot where quorum sensing is going to happen? Because you've made this, world for these entities that are the biology to build stuff from. And it can look at what's not in your soil and build the biology that'll make that particular compound so it can be in your soil.
Yep. Yeah.
I think quorum sensing is a wild thing, man. But Tony, we're at an hour, brother. So Johnny never showed up. Have no idea what happened to John today. I think John and I are going to be at the Unicorn Cup for next Monday's show. We'll see if I can corner him down, but I'll be broadcasting live from the Unicorn Cup. At least for the OG's Power Hours. So, guys, we'll see you then. Tony, you got anything else coming up?
Not myself. No, not really. Okay. I did want to tell Peter here, what's the best way would be to just use a worm casting tea. You want to add biology and a small amount of nutrition, especially nitrogen, because biochar will suck nitrogen right out of your system.
Yeah.
It'll try to store it into the carbon that's there. So
take your biochar sites.
Yep. And I would just soak that shit in, like, take a 5-gallon bucket of worm tea and fill it halfway with your biochar, and then let it soak for 24 hours, and then lay it out the next day so that it's not sopping wet. Let it dry, and then put that in your soil, and you're good to go. You're getting 2% by volume.
To inoculate it is you can actually pee on it. Urea will work. Compost pile. The more biology you can stuff in there before you would ever put it into your system, the better. It's all about the biology, guys. The more biology you have, the more workforce you have in the soil system to grow your plants. So,
but I would say this with urine: if you take anything besides water in your system, don't use your piss to fucking grow plants with. Your body's filled with toxins, and it's coming out in your piss. You drink anything red. If you fucking take any medications, don't use your urine as a fertilizer, please.
Yeah, unless it's been broken down over weeks. And
not on cannabis, because cannabis is an accumulator. So everything you put on it's going to be in that leaf. Really, like, there's better ways than using your own piss. Research the monks that use their own feces and urine and find out why they had more pathogens in their stomach and died than everyone else around them. It's because they did that specific form of gardening. You should not be utilizing your own waste to grow your own food or anything to smoke. It's not safe.
Well, as a way to activate the biology to get your biochar going, and I'm not talking, peeing in your beds, Tony. I'm talking allowing the biology to break down and form the other biology that's necessary to get the cycle started.
And that's easy. Just get some leaf.
But I'm just saying that it is possible to use it that way. I wouldn't.
Oh, it's possible, but again, like the negatives that could come from that, without passing the positives that could happen, are bad. Like, you really don't want to use your human waste for any kind of food product or inhalant that you're going to give back to humans. You want to piss in something that you're going to feed to your horses? That's great. You want to piss in something you're going to feed to me, we're going to get in a fight later at minimum. You don't need to seriously do the research on utilizing your own waste. Yeah, we could do that back in the day. That's not how we made it.
Well, we didn't have the chemicals in our bodies back in the day either. So that's
why I brought up if you take any form of medication, if you're drinking anything that's got red dyes in it, those things are terrible for humans. To put those into the soil and then grow your food with it, or grow your cannabis, which is an accumulator, it's not a great thing. There's certain plants that you could grow in that aren't going to accumulate all the shit that came with those things. Cannabis ain't one of them. Cannabis will accumulate everything that you put on it. Period. Yeah. That's what it's trying to do. It can be used to revitalize a poison terroir. You could go out and there's somewhere that was heavy metals everywhere. You could plant cannabis all over it, and the heavy metal levels will drop the next year. And that's why utilizing certain organics today are coming back as dirty because of the input being used was dirty. And your urine is
actually you can go another step on that, because that's something that actually was brought up with Tom Landry. He had one particular strain that was registering high, not dangerous levels, but higher than it should have been in a certain component. That component wasn't even supposed to be in the soil. It wasn't found in any of the soil tests, and the plant itself was creating that stuff. So yeah, she can accumulate wild things, man. But that's why, a lot of the accumulators we call weeds are the plants that are actually can give us medicine. The dandelion, you can consume all three parts. But anyway, we are over the hour, guys. So as I said, we've got Ron Harrington, Gold Hat Seeds. His first strain was Mad Dog, and back in '77. He's on with Av and Leighton today, so you won't want to miss that here in a couple of hours, guys. So with that, peace out, everybody.